a couple ideas about touchstones immediately come to mind, just drawing from these classics and from the training that we received of thinking deeply and interacting through discussion. One of the first is the archetype of the hero's journey. It's something that's so classic that some people say, you know, Homer kind of invented it, but in all reality, it's been around as long as humans have been around, right? That you have a hero that experiences trial or trauma, they overcome it to reach point B, whatever their destination ends up being. What is consistent across all those stories is there's always an opposition of some kind, and in response, there's some sort of inner strength or inner draw that is built upon to overcome it. His touchstone is something that, regardless of the external circumstances, is something that he's able to continue with. And again, we just see this repeated consistently and constantly. One of the first things we discuss is what makes a classic. And one of them is just longevity. The fact that the Aeneid and the Odyssey, actually I'll use Homer as an example because it's one of the best ones. Of the ancient texts, we essentially have one copy. You know, the Bible, just to juxtapose that, we have about 5,000 ancient copies of the Bible, but we have one of Homer. And yet it's been wildly successful and has continued through every age of time. Really speaks to, okay, there's something about this book that's pulling at something human within us that is constant across time. That's something that we can trust. As a touchstone, I think the first thing is consistency. That's a consistent message that you can constantly draw upon and apply in different situations. I think the next one, the second one, is that it clearly delineates good and evil. And what we just kept coming back to is you have to have some sort of touchstone, some sort of thing that you can come back to. You can bring other ideals and ideas and compare them. And I think that bears fruit in a lot of different ways, and as well with the right mentor. This is something we talked about as well. You have to have mentors with these touchstones, a lot of ideas. But you have to have both in order to know, once again, the opposition and the good, using the way the Greeks did, like good, this higher good, this eudaimonia, this good living, and together they can come together. There's a lot of different voices, especially in a digital world. There's so many different things coming at you, so many different voices. Once you have a touchstone, once you have something that's consistent and can delineate at least some choices, it makes the other smaller choices a little bit easier. So for me personally, some of my core books are some of the ones that I've mentioned. So a lot of the classics, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid are some of my favorites. I love the Inferno. I love Paradise Lost. These are books that have withstood the test of time, so that when, for instance, I come across Ender's Game, another one of my favorite books, or Speaker for the Dead, the second in that series, it's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more complicated story, a lot of psychology, a lot of pretty difficult choices, objectively, that don't have super clear answers. And yeah, I'm able to go back to the basics, go back to my classics, go back to my touchstone and say, what resonates here? Ender's Game only came out, a decade ago, maybe a little bit over 15 years, perhaps. And yeah, I can match it up against classics and be able to derive those principles of continuity pretty well and find some sort of consistency, even if it hasn't lasted for very long. So kind of at a high level, it's a lot of thoughts, but a touchstone, I feel, is not only useful, but crucial. Because otherwise, if you don't have a touchstone, if you don't have something to return to, you're wishy-washy. Every new book and every new fad and every new political agenda just becomes the new thing, and it becomes just as good as the rest. So without some sort of more objective, I don't know if it's possibly completely, but more objective standard, you're able to sift and delineate between good, better, and best choices as you interact with a very complicated world.